He is the director of SI All-American, college football recruiting analyst. He's been our go-to guy, and we talk about the world of recruiting. John Garcia even got a new haircut, a new profile on the Twitter account. I see it, man. I see it. He's looking good. John Garcia, I hope all is well, man. Welcome into the game in Tuscaloosa.
You're too kind, my friend.
Man, I mean, look at it, man. I mean, you look like a guy that deserves to be in Hollywood. I mean, you got the trim beard going on. I mean, you got the it's all about the new job, man. All right, so let me just kind of explore because Drew DeArmond kind of broke the story yesterday on our show, and he knows that we depend on you, and he depends on you as well. And he said he wanted to congratulate you on the air yesterday when we all heard the announcement. But let's talk about it, man. You kicked it off yesterday when you talk about SI, and let's kind of break it down the transition. Talk about what kind of made you jump into this.
Yeah, well, when Sports Illustrated calls you and wants to start a whole new department, you have to listen, right?
Sure you do.
So that's kind of how it played out, and basically they're going to get into college football recruiting coverage, something that they've touched on here and there with select guys. I think they did a lot on the big name guys. Trevor Lawrence had a big spread at one point in high school. I think Dylan Moses as well. But they've never really covered it day to day, built an All-American team, did rankings, anything like that, comprehensively. And for them to look my way to lead that massive endeavor was extremely humbling and something that obviously I could not say no to. And we're officially underway. The first ever SI All-American team will feature 25 high school seniors. And the first one is one your audience is pretty familiar with. Quarterback Bryce Young, of course, headed to Alabama in about 4 weeks.
So, John, we've all kind of become accustomed to rankings, 4-star, 5-star, this, that, and the other, and different opinions and different predictions and projections. What are you guys going to do different there at SI? Because I know you've got a plan, and I don't want you to reveal everything. But what's the coverage going to be like? Is it going to be similar to some of the other models, or are you guys going to take a different approach?
I think it'll be a little bit of both.
Okay.
In terms of the projection, everything's a projection, but I think to what distance you would like to project is something that has been a hot topic in my 10 years of doing this. I've worked with 3 different companies, and do you project for the NFL? Are you looking for the NFL draft? What are you projecting towards? And I think that's where at SI it'll be a nice change. We're going to project for college. That's where the passion is. That's where the passion lies. That's where our focus is. We are a college football recruiting analyst. So we are going to project for college. So if I have a 5'10" quarterback who I think can do a lot of great things like we do and looking at Bryce Young, he's going to be my first team guy, despite maybe not having those conventional quarterback measurables that would maybe have you hesitate a little bit if you are projecting for the NFL draft. Although, of course, that sliding scale has become more fluid in the last, 5 years or so. So that's, I think, the biggest difference is that we are completely college football focused. I think the NFL is great. I think that's obviously the ultimate destination for a lot of these kids and what they want to do. But for us, studying high school football, we're going to project it one level ahead instead of trying to dig into the task of 2 levels ahead, which is extremely hard to do. And we respect everybody who's doing that, but we're going to focus solely on the college game. And then in terms of rankings and things like that, there's still a lot of fluidity there in terms of our plan. But this All-American team is going to be an intimate group, 25 guys, not 100, not, second team, third team, honorable mention. There's going to be, 12 on offense, 11 on defense, and a couple of versatile all-purpose guys, and that's it. So we're really focused on in-depth evaluation and really intimacy with how deep we go into it, with a heavy emphasis on their senior years too, which is something that I've always, taken pride in. I know a lot of college football teams take pride in too, valuing that senior film, that senior evaluation. So those are some of the key elements that we're looking at the outset. And as we dig deeper and expand in the months to come, I think the picture will become much clearer, but that's where we're at right now.
John, I want to ask you about Bryce Young because you limited, you mentioned him as we were talking about it, but I wanted to talk more about the SI. But let's look at Bryce Young for a couple of minutes. This guy that's someone that you've always been high on when we look at Bryce Young. What did he do in his senior year to maybe give you that push ahead that he may be even better than maybe we thought? I mean, he certainly worked his way up the radar and continues to shine as a passer.
Yeah, I think his last 2 years in particular at that school, which for the better part of his junior and senior year was considered the number one high school football team in the country, just the way that he was able to play consistently there. He transitioned a lot of his targets. I think even those folks in California would tell you his targets as a junior were excellent, elite, as good as anybody in America. Compared to this year, there was a change. I wouldn't say a drop-off, but a very clear change. So I think Bryce showed the ability to command the offense regardless of those around him, which is obviously an important quality in looking at a quarterback, because when he goes to college, there are going to be plenty of transitions in terms of the targets. So his consistency junior year to senior year was really important in that evaluation. And he had a great individual senior season as well. You're talking about 4,500-plus passing yards, 68 total touchdowns, 72% on the completion percentage, even with some of those different targets. And again, the target on his back and Modern Day Academy's back was as big as ever. And they still managed to go 12-1 and put up points in every single game. And even in the final game where they did fall in the playoffs, if you watched it, you don't really put a ton of it on Bryce. You put some of it on him because he's the quarterback and that's part of it. But there was a lot of missed opportunities, we'll just say. So I think in terms of Bryce's progression, his consistency, he's always gotten a little bit better. And he just has this kind of special factor that stands even beyond those gaudy numbers. He just has it. And when you spend time with the kid, I hate to do it to him, but you get some Tua Tagovailoa vibes just in terms of how consistent he is with you, whether you're doing an on-camera interview or you're at an award show with Shaq and Megan Rapinoe like we were last night, or you're just in a cab hanging out just talking football. He has the same demeanor, the same kind of resolve, no matter what we're discussing. I'm even asking him about social media, and he's breaking it down as if we're on the chalkboard, looking at sliding protections and manipulating a defensive coverage. He is the same every single moment. And I think that is about as good of a quarterback quality as you could ask for.
Is he a guy that could be an instant impact guy? Let's just say that, John, that Tua Tagovailoa goes on to the NFL. Regardless, we don't know the decision. He's even admitted last week that he's still kind of unsure of where his decision may take him to the NFL. Let's just pretend that happens. You've got Mac Jones here that's established, and he's been in the system. He's had a great game against Auburn. Is Bryce Young a guy that can come in? Let's just use the word compete. Can he compete for playing time in his first year?
100%. I think that's what you look for at that position now. When we talk about projecting ahead, and a lot of times we're talking about, well, if this guy does X, Y, and Z, then maybe he can see the field early. But with a guy like Bryce Young, it's all about right now with him. He's calling 60+% of the plays at again, the number one high school in the country. He's adjusting them pre-snap. He's sliding offensive protections all before he gets the ball in his hands and after he gets the ball in his hands. He's got as quick of a trigger as we've seen in the last few cycles. He's got this athleticism that allows him to manipulate the pocket and extend plays for his wide receivers. But he does so with the thought of moving the ball downfield, like we used to say about Tua at the same stage. The right arm is gifted. He trusts it, and he's not very turnover prone already. And he comes from a system at Modern Day that is very spread, pass first, quarterback in control, which is right in unison with Steve Sarkisian, who he's extremely tight with and has been for a couple of years now, and what they want to do at Alabama. So you throw all that together with the fact that he's enrolling in January, which we know for a quarterback is absolutely essential if you got a shot to play year one, kind of like Tua did. So all the things that you would expect at the high school level, all the things you would want to see at the high school level in terms of a guy being talented enough and mature enough to play day one, we see all those things with Bryce Young. Obviously, once you get there and the bullets are live and it's college SEC players, that is all different, and that is something we cannot obviously know. But in terms of everything else, I would be pretty surprised if we weren't talking about Bryce Young heavily in the mix, like you said, regardless of what Tua's decision is.
John Garcia, what's next for Alabama? Right now they're going through this, and I think they've adjusted quite well. I think they had the first year of maybe Nick Saban adjusting to the early signing period and how big it was going to be. I think a lot of us were kind of unsure exactly where this would go. What's Alabama up to right now as they no practice, just everything focused on recruiting? What's the latest?
Yeah, well, signing day is approaching rather quickly, right? Middle of next week for the early period where most of the prospects, again, will sign letters of intent. Where I've seen Alabama focus a lot is on the offensive side of the ball. Again, it's 2019. That's where games are won and lost. Heck, Alabama's scored a lot of points in every game, including each loss this year. So the offensive emphasis is as important as ever. I think on the offensive line, there is a major need for Alabama. Right now, just a couple of verbal commitments, but Alabama in the works with several top-ranked prospects. Some of them committed elsewhere. I would say most of them committed elsewhere. With the coaching carousel, you wonder with Georgia, a couple other schools, where that can maybe impact Alabama. And then Javian Cohen, top offensive tackle in the state of Alabama, really a coin flip between the Tide and the Tigers at this point. As time progresses, you tend to think Alabama, with the need and the desire there, has a pretty good chance at flipping another Auburn commitment. And then at wide receiver, I think there's still some room to improve the class. Rakeem Jarrett is a very popular name. He's considered, one of the top 5 or 6 receivers in the country. He's more of a slot, but an explosive type of slot. And we know what Bama's been able to do with that. In the last 24 hours, there's reason to believe that if he does back off of this LSU commitment, Alabama could be the program to benefit there. But extremely fluid. There's still some defensive targets on the board as well along the defensive line. Linebacker Phillip Webb is a guy. There's a junior college cornerback. So there's still some spot recruiting going on across the board, but we certainly at a minimum expect Alabama to add a handful of guys or so in the next, 7 or 8 days.
John, we were talking about a couple of minutes ago with Mike Detillier, and I'm curious, when you look at recruiting and you look at recruiting the way that it is right now, is there a shortage in certain position groups or certain players across the country? I mean, big physical defensive lineman, I guess, has always been maybe a little bit of a shortage, but is there somewhere out there that you're looking at, you're going, not Alabama, not in the SEC, but just across the board? Is there something that there's just not enough to go around?
I actually sort of accidentally ran into this talking with Nick Saban on signing day a few years ago. Actually, I went into studio with you right after this. I think it's cornerback. I think it's a true polished cornerback. Now, we see our outlying examples, Pat Surtain last year, Derek Stingley at LSU this year. But I think because the cornerback is such an athletic position that in high school, a lot of these kids are playing another position because they're the best athlete on their team, whether it's quarterback, like Henry Ruggs did in high school, or wide receiver, just kind of getting the ball in his hands and allowing his high school team to score points, which, who could blame a high school coach for that? But I think it takes away some from just how experienced some of these corners are coming into the college game, not to mention if they are a known experienced corner like a Marlon Humphrey, how many passes are really headed his way his senior year of high school. I went to 3 or 4 Hoover games that year, and Marlon was targeted maybe twice in those 3 or 4 games. So the reps and the polish there with corners, not the natural athleticism, it's just something that it just doesn't seem to be as readily available as maybe it was in years past. So the kids have the measurables, but that unmistakable experience, which is the best teacher, of course, I think those are some things that we don't see as much of as we track, college football recruiting. But of course, some of these elite athletes, they get to college and they don't need that much time, and they're ready to go sooner rather than later. But I think the Pat Surtains, the Derek Stingley types are fewer and far in between.
Hey, John, I want you to put the players' hat on just for a minute. Where do you stand with players sitting out bowl games?
I'm going to sound old here, Ryan. I think when you grind with your teammates for X amount of years, not just months and not just this year, you're on that team. You're a part of it. And one game is most likely not going to change your draft stock. There have been some sort of freak examples. I know Jalen Smith, the linebacker out of Notre Dame, is kind of the go-to example here of just suffering a catastrophic injury in the bowl game and how it could affect you in the NFL. But, he still got drafted, and he just got paid, I believe, with the Dallas Cowboys, as if he was that first-round draft pick. So I'm always going to lean towards, playing rather than not. But at the same time, if your heart is not in the game of football on a given day, you are opening yourself up to more injury risk. If it's on your mind, things like that. So from the player's perspective, if the doubt exists, then maybe they should err on the side of caution, because it's just not something you can, sort of half-ass. You have to be all in a bowl game, in the game of football. So I'm always going to lean towards them playing, but of course it's their own decision, and we have to respect what they do with their future. All of their financial situations are different. Sure. Their family situations are all different. So I respect it. But, just from a player's perspective, I personally could not imagine, sitting out the potential last game of my college career, especially, one that was very good to me, like in Alabama's case. All these kids have won a national title. They've all won SEC titles. There's a whole lot of good that's come out of this. So I couldn't imagine voluntarily, skipping one of those. But that's just me.
Well, that's been kind of the theme of the show today. We've been talking about it, kind of discussing it, and we're kind of mixed. I'm a little bit old-fashioned, but I understand it. I get it. I understand it. It doesn't mean that I agree with what they're doing, but it's hard to say, well, this is what I would do, because I'm not in that situation, because we don't really know what we would do. I mean, somebody gives me a $3 million winning lottery ticket, and they say you cannot cash it until the end of April. I would guard that thing with my life. Right.
So, yeah, you completely understand it. And gosh, nowadays, just imagine the people in these kids' ears, and all this information is so readily available. Jerry Jeudy can look up 17 mock drafts in 17 minutes if he likes, and he can average them out and say, well, I'm averaging, the ninth pick in the draft in these 17 mock drafts. So it's not like it's secret information or hidden on the player's own end. And obviously, the voices around them, can only emphasize it one way or the other. So you certainly understand it.
John Garcia, what's next for SI.com as we continue to follow this world of recruiting, leading in, as you said, early signing period, National Signing Day next week?
Yeah, well, we've got 24 more All-Americans to name to the first ever SI All-American team. And then, of course, National Signing Day right around the corner. We're going to take a heavy look at kids making decisions and obviously these new coaches, how they adjust on the carousel and hit the ground running with, a week or so to go until we start judging them tangibly. So a very fun time at SI, and it's going to be big. We're gonna expand, and it's going to be something that I put everything I got into. So I'm excited to see what that looks like.
John Garcia, we thank you so much for your time. If you want to connect with John Garcia, the best way to do it is straight up on the Twitter account at John Garcia_Jr. available there, SI.com. You can find all the recruiting tab, as he is calling it, the All-American. When you look at Bryce Young, a big write-up there, SI.com. I know we've retweeted it. You'll find the article there featuring Bryce Young, the new and upcoming quarterback. And John, real quick, I just got a message. There's no way anybody else slips in Bryce Young, right? This thing's over. It's done, right? I mean, this guy's set to arrive here any day now, right? I mean,
it's over. I know There was a little bit. Once Tua got hurt, I think some people played devil's advocate and said, well, what if he comes back? What does that do to Bryce? Bryce is locked in. He's done. He's moving to Alabama January 5th, I believe, and classes start the 8th. They are completely excited with the program, top to bottom. Saban and Sark went out there last week to meet with them on a visit. They are good to go. And Sark shouldn't be undervalued here. He is a major reason Bryce Young is Bama bound.
John Garcia, thank you for your time, man. Have an awesome week. Thank you, sir.
Likewise, Ryan. Thanks for having me.